Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that we hope will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here's my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hello. I got an interesting guest this week. He
hmm
didn't want to come on the show when I first invited him. We'll get to that in a moment. He calls himself SWYX, and he's sponsoring, or his group, Latent Space, is sponsoring in New York a very strong conference for AI engineers, and he's going to tell us about it. I read Latent Space. He does excellent recording and a podcast, and his analysis is usually right on topic. But he was said, "But my work is for engineers. What are you putting me on a general radio show?" And I said we could figure out a way to make it interesting. So his conference is going to focus on AI agents, and I'm going to be throwing him some stuff about AI agents. And it's an important it's an important thing to understand. Everybody in AI thinks the biggest thing about to happen is agents. Right now, when you're dealing with AI, you can talk to ChatGPT, you can tell Midjourney to make you a visual, you can say, read these 5,000 mammograms, and so on. But what you usually can't do is change something in the outside world. You can't, and these are the terrible examples, but these are the ones that were first there. Make an airline reservation, make a dinner reservation, or do anything else. My impression is that it's going to be really important, and Shawn's going to give us some interesting examples, but it's not clear that it's really ready for prime time. Shawn, talk about your conference first.
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm not sponsoring it. I'm just running it. And for the last 2 years, we've been running conferences in San Francisco, the sort of epicenter of the AI scene. My conferences are really focused on AI engineers, which is this concept that I help to popularize about software engineers that are building products with AI. So they're not necessarily training the models that belongs to the foundation model labs, but they're putting it into the products that you love and use every single day, from Zoom to LinkedIn to everything else. Sometimes they're doing a bad job of it, and I totally understand that. And we want to get and this conference is for them to get better at it. Uh, for the first time, we're coming to New York, and pretty excited about that. I think that's why you were interested in or heard about us. And we're actually doing it next month, like literally a month from today in February. And I'm nervous, but also excited and what we're gonna get. But yeah, thanks for having me, and happy to talk about anything.
Tell us a little bit more about it. Where are you getting your speakers?
Yeah, speakers come from like we're really trying to get the most technical and sort of hands-on keyboard people as possible. I think that a lot of AI conferences lose the plot by talking about AGI, talking about safety and regulation, and not really talking about the practical day-to-day because they're mostly
Oh,
talking.
you want to talk about that? I can talk about that for 3 hours and I wouldn't say anything interesting.
Yeah. So what we have is we have representatives from all the big labs. So we got DeepMind, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Meta. And then we have because it's New York, we're also trying to talk hear stories from people putting AI in practice. So we have Jane Street, BlackRock, Bloomberg, and Brightwave, as well as Method Financial, which is kind of a newer finance firm, as well as some of the other companies that are lesser known but going to be interesting, like Perplexity and Windsurf. And so the idea is to give you a curation of what the best of Silicon Valley, the best of, who has sort of a New York and AI presence, and to bring them all together in one day. It's actually sort of a 2 day conference. What I just described was the engineering day. There's another leadership day where it's more about being a CTO or VP of AI that is managing a team of engineers, building an AI strategy, and defining a roadmap for the next 10 years. And so like we like that balance of management and engineering.
Now, you were saying about how technical a lot of your speakers are going to be.
Mhm.
Are you going to expect me to pass the test on vector calculus and linear algebra before you'd let me come in?
No, we don't. We don't impose tests on people. Although I think many of our attendees will have college math under their belt. This is much more about programming, actually. I would expect you to pass a basic programming test about calling APIs and putting it up on an app somewhere, because that's the at least the minimal bar for being an AI engineer is doing that. It's increasingly easier and easier with the coding assistants and prompting tools that you have available to do those things. So actually, honestly, the bar isn't really that high, but not everyone passes it. And yeah, like it is meant. The summit is a selective conference where people actually apply to attend, and we are still seeking applications. It's closing soon, but it's more curated as compared to the San Francisco World's Fair, which is much larger. So this one is about 600 to 800 people, but World's Fair is going to be 3,000 people this year, and so that one is open to literally anyone interested in AI engineering. This one we're trying to really focus on the best of the field.
Can they find it by going to Latent Space?
Latent Space is actually my podcast and newsletter, but they can find it more directly by opening up a browser and typing in ai.engineer. That is actually a TLD that you can buy, and we bought the domain ai.engineer, so you just go there.
That's a good domain. And how much are you charging?
We're charging a range of prices. I think it's somewhere between $600 to $1,200, depending on the kind of ticket package you want. Because we also have workshops for people to get hands on a keyboard and get 1 to 3 hour long workshops where they actually build something. You can spend all day doing a bunch of talks and walk away still not knowing how to implement some of the ideas. So if you want to get serious time with the people who made these tools, I recommend the workshops too.
In other words, if you're a professional actually working in this field, look at it.
Yeah, we designed this basically for your training budget. Like everyone has professional training, and like I'm sure New York is in my view, New York is very underserved in sort of the technical AI circles. Like everything happens in San Francisco kind of.
No, it
And
doesn't.
um I'm 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 exaggerating,
It
but I'm
happens in
rounding.
Singapore and Hong Kong and Shanghai and Beijing.
Yes, but the top
And what's
tier
the most
work.
exciting model to come out recently?
You're talking about DeepSeek or one?
Yeah. Where's
Yeah,
that come from?
it comes from China. And yeah, it's super interesting work. But it is one of many top tier models, and most of which are American, and most of which are built in San Francisco. So like, yes, I'm rounding up.
No, they're
And
not. DeepMind is in London.
uh,
And I believe that Jan said that most of the work that Facebook puts out is being done in Paris.
um,
So it's American
I think he
companies.
doesn't he physically live in New York?
He does physically live in New York,
Yeah,
but
we
he's
have
very close, and there's a very strong community developing in Paris.
sure. Okay, so
Uh,
I think what I mean, like the kind of events. So there are 10 to 20 AI meetups here a week. That are all technical, all engineers. The kind of gathering and community that you see in the Bay Area is very different than the others. I agree with you. All these, everything you said is true. But at the same time, like the reason we're trying to bring the conference from San Francisco to New York, I think it's because uh, we haven't really tried to sort of feature the New York tech scene as much. I know New York has had great conferences as well. It's just I don't see the kind of engineering content coming out of it as could happen. So
there,
I'm
there,
honestly.
there isn't a good community in New York.
Yeah,
There's a whole lot of people working at it. I
exactly.
don't know how many people Google has in New York.
Oh, they have
They
a
have
huge office in
tens of
there.
thousands. I don't know how many of those are working on AI,
Yeah.
but there are also big AI things inside places like Morgan Stanley and Citibank. They, we don't in New York get together. You don't know this, but the other fellow on this call, Stu, is the president of the New York chapter of the Internet Society. He just got elected, and we're trying to do some good things. And we are putting together an AI group, and we'll see how it goes. We just because the Internet Society is well known, it gives us entree everywhere, but we have to come up with interesting content in order to get people involved. And it's not so obvious where and how to find them in New York. There is an AI meetup that ties into Runway and so on, but there's no single place. Uh, we might, well, I've done it before, not in AI and other things, and I know it's quite possible. And maybe we can put that together using the Internet Society. That just gives us a base. Now, what can you do with agents? What I want to do with agents is I want to automate my looking at the major Chinese tech sites in Google Translation, which I do right now. I'll go to two or three of them a day, and maybe 5 or 8 in the course of a week, because a lot of the most interesting stuff is happening in Beijing and Shanghai, and Hangzhou and Chengdu, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing all of those. I assume since you're from Singapore, you have functioning Chinese?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, you were pretty good on all of them except for Hangzhou, which was but that was pretty good.
And I've actually been there, and it's beautiful. And it
Yep,
has a big community because that's where Alibaba is.
yep.
So maybe I'll get a chance to go to there again. So what I would want to do is I would want my agent to go out to a list of 10 websites in Chinese, get the translation, read them, and pick out which of the articles that are not replicated anywhere else. That we don't need to hear about what Trump just did on AI. In fact, we don't want to hear what Trump just did on AI. Uh, I want to hear the things that are happening in China that people in the West don't know. I'd love to have an agent that could go out, find it for me, give me summaries, and help my work. That's one of the things that a decent agent would do. The question I have for you is, what are the really interesting or unusual agents you've seen out there? Ideally for consumers, ideally already in production.
Yeah, those are great questions. The most obvious ones that people encounter that sometimes works, sometimes has a lot of frustration are the customer support agents. This is, really frontline tier one customer support. It could be chatbots on a website or it could be a phone call voice agent thing. Lots of people are building that. There's almost too many to name, but Sierra is the leading sort of provider of that to a lot of other companies. And yes, it can
And
be
don't
very
we all
frustrating.
hate those?
We
When we
often
go to
hate those.
Amazon
We,
and
we, we
I
hate
have
those
to
when
go
they
through
don't
8
work.
screens to get to a human being because I want something that
Yeah.
the AI hasn't been programmed for.
So, well, that's a phone tree. That's, the sort of eight levels of questions. Those are phone trees, and agents can potentially eliminate phone trees,
And
which is really great.
potentially, but are they doing it?
They will be doing it, and there's absolutely no doubt in my mind.
Which which is where they want to go. Stu, why don't you come in for a minute?
Sure.
Well, as kind of a layman and not being as well versed in AI as Dave is, maybe Shawn, you can break down a little bit for the layman exactly what agents are and kind of give us a scope of where they might be going and doing over the next several years? What are we talking about? How can that enhance regular folks' everyday experience, whether it's online or in the real world?
And when you finish explaining that, I'll ask you questions about what's really working and what is it going to take to get things working the way you want them to be. But why
Yeah.
don't you start out giving Stu his basics?
Yeah, you're asking me to define agents, which is very nebulous. There's a lot of conflicting definitions. I'll give you mine. So, agents are AI systems that can use tools and autonomously decide on actions in order to achieve tasks that you assign them. So, a very simple agent would be a LLM with retrieval augmented generation that can autonomously decide if it doesn't have enough information, and it can go out and get more information to fulfill your request. So that is one form of agent. So we're trying. So what I'm really trying to do with my definition, because my engineering track is all about agent engineering, is to really try to draw a line between just a regular chatbot and an agent, where there is some kind of artificial intelligence deciding what to do. They should have an AI in the loop rather than just sort of sequential code, which is kind of more like a phone tree where it's very deterministic. A happens after B, after happens after C. The more intelligence you kind of infuse into your system, the more it'll start to function like a human intelligence and hopefully be more usable than I guess a normal typical chatbot.
Mhm.
Should I go into what's working, or did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah.
What's working is the interesting thing, and hopefully you're going to tell people there's fascinating things being worked on, but there's not that much that I recommend to people. Have you seen much
It's true.
other than
I,
programming? Programming is
yeah.
obviously working some.
Yeah, coding agents are very popular, and obviously the first thing that developers want to do is make assistants for themselves. So we're really great at that. Yeah. So one thing I wanted to make, one more point I wanted to make to Stu is this is kind of a layer on top of the foundation models that the model labs are building. So whenever you hear about models from OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind, Meta, whatever, what have you, they're all foundation model like LLMs. Agents are kind of built on top of them with all the necessary systems that make the sort of final user interface happens. And that's what AI engineers, the thing I focus on and the thing the conference is around, is dedicated to serving. It's like a sort of mini industry on top of the foundation models labs.
And absolutely everybody, when they did their year-end predictions or year beginning predictions,
Uh-huh.
said this year it's all going to be about agents. But
Yeah,
how well are they working now?
sure. Um, they are working in some limited capacity, and they will improve over time. And I think you can think about this in a very similar way to self-driving cars. We have Waymos here running around every day. I just started seeing driverless Zooxes running around, which is kind of interesting. And the sort of self-driving car community has like 5 levels of self-driving, right? One is you have sort of lane assist. You stay within your lane, but you still have to keep your hands on keyboard or hands on the steering wheel, and you have to sort of really observe. And if you take your eyes off, they will disengage the self-driving. And then the other is level 5 self-driving, where it's full self-driving. You just give it your destination, and you can go to bed. You can sleep. You can
Didn't
eat.
didn't Tesla deliver full self-driving 2 or 3 years ago?
They're marketing full self-driving, and it's controversial what level it is. But that those are the levels. What
It's
I'm
not
really
controversial. It's not level 5 full
it's
self-driving. And
yeah,
it's
I'm not
still occasionally killing drivers.
so people
Although
will
that
over yeah, people will over market this, and you have to be sort of aware of that. At the same time, you cannot deny the progress that is happening. And so all I'm talking about is levels. So level 1 agent versus a level 5 agent have very different success rates, right? Level 1 will be a lot easier to achieve, and level 5 will be a lot harder. And so I think level 1 is kind of the sort of read-only agents, like the research agents, the ones that is working right now, basically Perplexity and Gemini Deep Research. Perplexity is the one that you can use. Gemini Deep Research is still in alpha, but a lot of people have it. And these are basically you ask them to research something, they go off and search the web, and they come back a few minutes later with a full report. Perplexity this is not the default experience, but Perplexity has agent version of this, and that is what you would assign an intern, right? Like basically, like for the podcast that I do, I asked Gemini Deep Research to go and build a report for me, and that's an agent that goes off and does things. I think the reason that this is better is because it's pure text. Like it's you can just search the web for me, and it can decide if it needs other follow questions and all that. And I don't really have to do much. Like it doesn't. It's a read only. It's kind of what I think about for level 1 agents. It's a lot harder when you have to read and do. Execute tasks on your behalf. That's where you need some level of integrations and permissions with, let's say, your calendar, your Google Drive, your social media accounts, your Slack, whatever you use for work. And those are the sort of more active agents. The ones that we interviewed on the podcast are Lindy.ai, as well as Dust. These are all made by sort of former AI researchers. And they're really working for some people. I think there's still an adoption curve. Have either of you heard of Zapier?
Don't know it.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, I probably won't come to your conference because I realized a long time ago that I can't learn everything, and I
Sure.
didn't put agents on my list.
Sure. But like,
So I don't know.
yeah, I think like basically being able to delegate work to a machine is the dream of humans, so that we can go off and do other things. And the trick is to find low value or sort of routine, tedious tasks that take a little bit of intelligence, but not a ton. And increasingly year after year, you're going to find that you can hand these off more and more to AI. And I think that's beneficial for everybody.
What do you think is going to be there in a year or two? Now it's a lot of early things with a few exceptions, and programming is a big exception. What do you think? What do you think is going to be working well in a year or two?
Yeah, the hottest topic within agents right now is the idea of proactive or ambient agents. Right now, a lot of agents start actions when you ask them to, and that's great. But at the same time, it could be a lot better. For example, what if it pinged you out of the blue, right? Like it was like if you imagine a coworker or a friend, they don't necessarily operate on your schedule. They don't necessarily only think about you when you think about them. They're just in your lives, right? And so you could be out and about somewhere, and they could say, hey, like there's this really great restaurant near you. Would you like to go? It really matches your preferences. And so that is one form of proactive or ambient agent. A lot of people are, for example, looking at agents that read your emails and help to notify you when something urgent is up, or help to filter them and screen them according to your preferences. I'm sorry about all those pings. Google was being very noisy at me. Okay, but so yeah, the in a year, the proactive and ambient agents that are just always on and ping you without your explicit action are going to be a lot more active, because I can see the work being done by the developers today.
Now,
okay, we got to take a break. We're at the halfway point. Shawn, can you stay with us?
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, we're talking with Shawn Wang of SWYX. About AI engineering and conference he's got coming up, and some of the latest stuff going on in the industry. You're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, Community and Technology, with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief break.
Outside. I've got to go away. Betty, it's cold out there. This evening has been hoping that you drop in. So very nice. I'll hold your hand. They're just like my ice. Mother will start to
Beautiful,
worry.
what's your hurry?
And father will be pacing the listen to that fireplace.
So really I better scurry.
Beautiful, please don't hurry.
Maybe just to have
Why
a
don't
drink.
you put some records on while I pour?
And the neighbors might think,
Betty, it's bad out there.
say, what's in this drink?
No cabs to be had out there.
I wish I knew how
Your eyes are like starlight now.
to break the spell.
I'll take your hat. Your hair looks
I
hair.
ought to say no, no,
Mind
no,
if
sir.
I move in
At
closer?
least I'm gonna say that I tried.
What's the sense of hurting my pride?
I really can't stay.
Baby, don't hold out.
Ah, but it's cold outside. I simply must go.
Betty, it's cold outside.
The answer is no.
I say it's cold out there.
The welcome has been
How lucky that you dropped in.
so nice and warm.
Look out that window at that
My
storm.
sister will be suspicious.
Your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there at the door.
Waves up on a tropical
My
shore.
maiden aunt's mind is vicious.
Your lips are delicious.
Well, maybe just a cigarette
Oh,
more.
never such a blizzard before.
I've got to go home.
Better you freeze out there.
Say, lend me your comb.
It's up to your knees out there.
You've really been great.
I thrill when you touch my hand.
But don't you see?
How can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be time to
Think
borrow.
of my lifelong sorrow.
At least there will be plenty implied.
If you caught pneumonia and
I
died,
really can't stay.
get over that old now.
Ah, but it's cold.
During our break, we were talking about some of the things that are actually happening with agents and some of the applications. And I know Google has one that's got everybody excited for the last month. Notebook LM. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Notebook LM actually was a project that was kind of existing without a ton of attention for maybe like a couple years. But they finally blew up because they added this new audio model. It doesn't really have a name. We just call it like deep dive or audio overviews or whatever. It's changed names a couple of times. But basically what it does is you can put in anything, a link to a website, your resume, which is super fun, or a bunch of PDFs that you want to read, and it will run for a bit. It's basically two agents working in the background. Again, read-only agents. That's why they're more successful, because they're only reading things. And they create an audio podcast out of it that's about 7 to 10 minutes long with these two really engaging voices, completely AI generated. They're discussing it. And they're tuned to be a little bit positive. So if you put in your own LinkedIn, they'll sing your praises like you've never heard before. It's really funny and kind of flattering. But yeah, I kind of call it Gemini or Google's ChatGPT moment, because that really blew up last year. And I think it's a sense of what might happen this year, which is that the market share shift from OpenAI has been pretty dramatic last year towards Anthropic, and I think this year Google is really going to be stepping up as well. So it'll be a very interesting year. When a bunch of audio people get together, I'm a podcaster, you guys are radio people. When a bunch of audio people, we love to talk about audio tooling, and so Notebook LM often comes up because they have this breakthrough AI voices. They say ums, they say ahs, they laugh. They sound very much more human than the normal sort of AI voices that you hear. Yeah, I mean, I would say that is actually one of the bigger agents from last year that I didn't even really think about because honestly, like the experience is hidden from you such that you just click a button and you get the podcast. They don't really tell you it's an agent, but it is under the hood. You just don't see it. And that's what success means to me as a technologist, that it fades into your everyday life. You take it for granted. It just works.
It's hard to describe or define agents, but there's some really tough things in this field. Can you imagine defining intelligence in a way that you can get some kind of consensus and then test it pretty accurately?
There's entire fields of research that are just that. This is the field
Yeah,
of
and it
benchmarking
all contradicts itself.
and evals. And yeah, I mean, defining something like intelligence, there are a lot of perspectives and points of view. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Tools are coming. OpenAI just came up with an agent tool, I think. And obviously Google is having some. How good are they now?
They're okay. So if you're talking about the first party tools, they're not that advanced. The first party meaning from OpenAI, from Google, they're not that advanced. And then you have to go to the startups that are building on top of OpenAI, on top of Google, to see sort of the real sort of frontier work on tool stuff. But I think what you're talking about is the ChatGPT tasks mode that was just released like literally a few days ago.
Well,
And
that's why we invited you. You keep up on what's been happening, and do write about it the same day often. I read you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so literally, we had the Karina, the researcher who created ChatGPT tasks in my podcast recording yesterday that we're going to release, I think Thursday or Friday. And yeah, it is a baby step. And I think what the relationship between the model labs and the startups that build on top of them is very interesting because basically the model labs always take the baby step and then the startups always try to push them to their limits. And it's a very interesting tension. But tools, yeah, that is the first of many tools, right? What tools have been made available to ChatGPT since launch? If you're out of date, it's like web search. Like you used to be only able to query the knowledge that was stored in the model's brain. Now the model can go out and search the web before answering you, and obviously that's a win because it's more updated and more broad than what the model already knows.
Who do you think is doing that pretty well on things that are recent? If I wanted to write something about the Trump inauguration,
yeah, it's going to be ChatGPT.
I had this problem the other day on something I was trying to figure, and I was amazed. I kept getting these messages. Our data only goes through October.
Yeah, that's what sort of context or like the data cutoff is. But yeah, any model that has been connected to the web with search, they'll probably tell you about it. It'll probably be like a flag that you turn on. So ChatGPT search works like that. There's a button you have to click to turn on search. It's pretty easy once you know it's there. Perplexity has that on by default. That's why they're sort of doing very well there. And the other one, the last one I'll highlight to you is Grok on X, formerly known as Twitter, which also has Twitter search on there.
I actually tried it because I forget what it was looking at, but just about a week ago, and I thought Grok would have it because, as you said, they had Twitter, but they didn't come up with very much of what I knew was out there.
Yeah.
They got the idea, but they're not executing that well, which is a surprise. Elon Musk really does have good programmers working for him.
He does, but also Twitter is a really, really messy data set to search and index. It's basically never been done. Not even Google indexes Twitter very well. So it's a tough problem, and I'm sure they're working on it. One more platform is actually a friend of ours that I interviewed called EXA.ai, and they're a new search engine that is based on neural search rather than normal keyword-based search, and that is something that has worked. Like literally yesterday, I had a friend from Anthropic ping me asking me for a link to something, and he couldn't find it on Google, couldn't find it on Perplexity, but he found it on Exa. And so like there's many different ways of searching. I think this will see a brief boom in alternative search engine before we find the new Google, whatever the new
Is
Google is.
that product, or do you have to get on a waiting list?
It's a live product. You can go to Exa AI. I get paid nothing to say this. I literally just interviewed them, and they are trying the hard thing, which is build a new search engine. Very, very difficult.
Give us that name again, Shawn, of that search.
Exa, EXA.ai. Yeah,
EXA.ai.
Exa. It stands for exabyte, which is, a form, 10 to the power of 18, which is kind of a dig at Google, which is 10 to the power of 100. It's this idea if you're building a new Google, it should be smaller and it should be sort of AI first. And yeah, I mean, there are many forms of AI search. I think you should find the one that works for you, but you should also keep an idea of the options, because if the one that you have as your default doesn't work for you, then just spin up the other two, and you'll probably find it.
Now, when I look at the AI models themselves, they've been playing leapfrog. That OpenAI came out, and Google had to come out with something that was as good or a little bit better. And then OpenAI came out with the next one, back and forth. And one of the consequences of that, when I try to put together an education thing or a webinar, is I know it's going to be out of date, and my recommendations are probably going to be wrong in 2 or 3 months. If I said, which software is the best 3D modeler right now, working from an image and creating a 3D model, 3D mesh, I could give an answer that was maybe true, but I would also know that somebody listening to me, watching me, reading me in 3 months may very well have something much better, because it's going that fast. It's really hard to know what to recommend. How do you deal with that? Or do you or all your stuff is always right on deadline?
Yeah, I think there's some amount of, if you're trying to learn AI or teach AI, you should be comfortable with change. We are in a very fast-moving period, and if you're not comfortable with that, then maybe you shouldn't be in the business to begin with. There's also a difference.
Slow down, because you're saying that, because I can think of half dozen things you could say the same thing about. If you can't understand how to program in Python, maybe AI isn't for you. And if you didn't like calculus in college, maybe it isn't. But when I bump up against that, there's usually a different kind of job in AI or a different kind of function in AI that you can do, even if you're not that good at vector calculus. Prompting is one of the examples. Documenting is one of the examples. Everybody's writing books. The books were all out of date before they're printed.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I have a book list, and I found 2 good books. What's his name at Berkeley? Sherman Russell? Is that what I'm thinking? And Peter Norvig did the textbook that everybody used.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant textbook. It's what I learned a lot of this from 2 years ago. It is now totally out of date, because everything that happened with ChatGPT and neural networks has people thinking about something different. Let's take you somewhere else, because we have a little bit of time. Stu, tell me when we're down to about 3 minutes, because I got.
We got about 10 minutes to go, so carry on.
Okay, let me go to some of the questions that are hard for me to answer, but I think are important. Jensen is going around the world. Jensen is the CEO of NVIDIA who makes all the chips. He's from Taiwan. He's very close with a lot of people in the mainland, saying that every major country must have its own AI model. That India should get one, and Germany should get one, and Brazil should get one. I'm doing naming the larger and richer countries. It's a little bit harder, although there's one coming out of the Emirates that's dedicated, and I saw one from Finland. That seems to make sense that any country is going to want something they have some control over and something that really does a good job on their stuff. But we just had some announcements on chips. The United States, and they actually say it, I read the White House press release on this, wants the lead in AI to always be in the hands of America and our close friends. That's not what they said, but it sure sounded like we don't think that Germany should have the right, or what's actually in this, we don't think that India should have the right to buy enough chips from NVIDIA, which is the only place, which is the best place to get them, that they could do their own models that was state of the art. Is that going to work? How's that going to play out internationally? You come from Singapore, you've lived in Europe, I think, and now
Wow.
you're in the US.
That's very good reading. Yeah. Jensen, unsurprisingly, it's not surprising that a GPU salesman would say that every country needs GPUs, right?
Sure.
So let's just, call a spade a spade.
But I've done enough research because I try to cover things internationally. Germany is one example, and India is one example, where they're both going very hard on it. The German government put several hundred million in, but it's not working very well. I forget the name of the company. And India has lots of software.
Yeah.
Germany can get the chips, but the US wants to block India from getting the chips.
Yeah. I don't know about blocking India. India seems like very friendly, right? But anyway, so like the point being that there's some amount of this that is Jensen talking his own book, that is trying to sell the things he's trying to sell, and to some extent the sovereign AI thesis, which is what the name for what you just described is a marketing play to make that happen, to make it a national priority of every country on earth, and to make him the more richer than God. I think that
he's already done that.
He's already done that. And there's some amount of it which comes from the government's point of view, which is a little bit of vanity. We must have our own models. We must be AI first. This comes from Singapore as well. In Singapore, we have SEAL, the sort of Singapore or a Southeast Asian oriented language model, and nobody uses it. Why? It's not good. It's not as good as the top tier American ones. It's kind of like saying which country.
Is almost surprising, because I keep seeing interesting papers coming out of Singapore. You've got several good universities with a lot of good computer scientists.
Academia is one thing, and I think AI has really shifted from academia to industry. So when you say good, what does good mean? I think a lot of academia is sort of very navel-gazy and very light in terms of what the actual industry impact has been. And this will be increasingly so over time, sadly, because the best research is now being done in closed labs. It's a very similar process to what happened with information retrieval pre-Google. Pre-Google, academia was bustling with like all this, new search techniques and all that. And then after a while, when Google won, all the frontier work was just done inside of Google and never published. So when you say these are good universities, I don't know what that means. It's great at getting citations.
Well, it means that there's some really smart people with experience. That may not be enough.
That may not be enough.
You're saying
money.
You're saying they haven't done it.
They need money,
effectively.
they need data, they need users, they need other smart people around them. And where the highest concentrations of smart people, it's not in the universities anymore. So it's a very tough call. I wanted to get to this point, which is
Tsinghua and Stanford don't have people of that quality?
not in the
You don't
density.
think Fei Li is as competent as anybody else out there?
Fei Li is fantastic. What has she done? She is on hold at Stanford and she's gone off to do a startup.
She's going to come back to Stanford. She's
I,
an
I,
academic.
well,
She's
sure.
an academic
I'm
who's
just saying,
trying to use her academic stuff.
yeah, like, is Stanford going to have 4,000 of the highest paid AI engineers, AI researchers in the world? No, that's going to be at OpenAI. It just is. Like,
Highest
Stanford is not
paid,
going to afford.
maybe, but 200 of the best. I know a lot of people who've decided to stay in
Sure,
academia
sure.
and not take the money that's out there or go in the industry.
Again,
And
like this is all about size and density of talent. Anyway, I wanted to make the point. Come back to the country thing. I want to make the point that I am sympathetic on one level, which is I think that LLMs are soft power. They basically encode your values in very subtle ways, your context, your knowledge, in very subtle ways. And I think one reason for America to want to have global dominance is to continue American soft power on the world. And I think it's a very desirable and understandable thing for China to want its own models because they want to assert their independence. It's very common for every country to assert this independence. I think like this is an expensive endeavor that will mostly fail for most countries. You have to try really, really hard and get really lucky with the right people, right talent, to make a dent. Because otherwise, it'll mostly not be as good as American models, and that has been the sort of working status quo for a while. Like it can change with Europe coming up, but should every country on earth have their own models? I strongly
no,
disagree.
I deliberately only talked about the
Yeah,
larger ones because
yeah,
it does
exactly.
that have. There definitely is the money and the ability in India to match anything in software programming.
I'll call it Japan for you. Japan's doing really good Japanese model work.
It does? Ah, I hadn't seen that.
They're
And they're
investing.
going to have chips in 2 years. Have you
Uh,
been watching that?
Again, any new chip story, there's a lot of people trying to displace NVIDIA, and they've failed for 30 years. So it's a really, really hard advantage that NVIDIA has built for itself for anyone to overcome.
Let me say one thing quickly, but we don't have time to really go into it. My sense is that sovereign AI is not that hard for a medium-sized country to produce. Holland can probably do it because you now have the open models. You have one from Facebook. You have DeepSeek, and is Tencent the other one that's open in China? One of
Actually, it's Tencent and Alibaba. So Alibaba is Quen and Tencent is Hunyuan.
yeah, no, they both have models, but I don't know whether Hongyuan is open source.
Yeah, they are.
They are? Okay. When you start with a state of the art, pretty much model, adapting it with the needs of your country, like the entire history of India, for example, is not the same thing as building a new model from scratch. Am I wrong?
Nope, you're not wrong at all. So yes, you can fine tune models much cheaper than it is to completely pre-train them from scratch. There may be subtle differences that are harder to eke out, but yes, I totally agree that people can fine tune things. That is not the race of AI. That is not what Jensen is trying to sell you on. He wants you to train models from scratch using his GPUs, but it is a very valid approach.
Okay,
Yeah.
guys, we're
We're going to
just
run
we're
out of
just
time.
winding down here, Dave. You asked me to give you
Let
the
me talk.
2 minute mark,
Last
so
thing
let's.
about this is a good one. One of the goals of a lot of people doing agents is to come up with an agent that can represent you in dating, talking to the agents of 100 other people that you might be interested in until they come to some kind of match. As far as I know, people are talking about it, but I don't think anybody has come close to delivering it. What do you think about AI for bringing people together like that?
Complex feelings, both positive and negative. The negative side is easier. This is literally the plot of a Black Mirror episode called Hang the DJ, where you have duplicates of you dating and doing simulations so that you can figure out your perfect match, and how that could potentially go wrong. On the other side, the current status quo of mostly all relationships going to online dating and the dating apps dynamics, I think bad for humanity. So anything, even a little bit different, we should try. So I think that people are going to try. I would be up for trying it. And I think that it probably won't work super well, but at least it's different from what we have today. And anything is a good idea
And the reason I'm throwing him that question is if you go to his website, on the menu, it says, date me. And I didn't have any idea what that was going to be, but I went there and it was a full profile he created of his interest and his experience for people who might be interested in dating him. And I bet it's going to work.
I've had a couple dates come out of that already, and it's a very San Francisco thing to do a Date Me doc. It's basically a way to opt out of the typical dating app profile where they only give you like 5 fields to fill in. It's a very limited way to express yourself. A Date Me doc is a much more fuller expression of the person that you are, and I think it's getting popularity. It's a very scary thing. I put it off for 6 months because I didn't feel like I was confident enough to put myself out there. But finally, I just got frustrated enough with the dating apps that I was like, all right, I'm just going to write a doc and see what happens. And I think so, like alternatives like that where, we're all like being run by some algorithm some way, right? Like if it's not an AI agent helping you decide, it's going to be some kind of recommendation system from Bumble or Hinge or Tinder. And you might as well take more control into your own hands with an agent that follows your instructions rather than Bumble's incessant need to keep you on subscription.
And I don't know anything about this because Jenny and I have been together for 25 years and I haven't been looking. And I'm very happy about that.
Okay, guys. With that, we got to conclude. We're about out of time. We've been talking
Give
with
the URL for the conference.
And go ahead. Any final thoughts or words, Shawn? Go ahead.
Yeah, conference is at ai.engineer. That's the simple URL. I love it. And my podcast is at latent.space.
Okay, we've been talking with Shawn Wang from SWYX. Shawn, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. All right, this has been Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Tune in. Just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.